Okay. Somebody had mentioned G.A. Morris said that they couldn't hear me, and I think I figured it out. So I'll just repeat everything that I had said up to that point. Thank you so much, G.A. Morris. It looks like it's fixed now. If somebody could confirm. Still no audio? Can you hear me now? If somebody can mention in the chat if they can hear me at this point, because I am showing that it should be working now. Oh, okay, great. Thank you so much, Jay Morris. Okay, we can get this started now officially. Welcome to the welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Jeremy Crow, and tonight is the spring equinox. It is officially the first day of spring. Often it's on March 21st, but according to what I looked up, this year it's on March 20th, which is today. So happy spring equinox to all of you. And what I wanted to talk to tonight was about some of the significance related to the spring equinox. So, whoa. Sorry about that. I was just trying to get a little bit of extra light here. All right. Let me just do one thing here so that I can also see so that I can see the chat at the same time here. All right. Okay. Well, I see a bunch of people have popped in here now. Beyond Zebra, welcome. Jay Morris, thank you. Uh, Eric, thank you for showing up, Eric. Let's see here. Triadic Arts, welcome. Um, from the Light of the Darkness, welcome. And happy spring equinox to all of you. So, if you're not aware, the spring equinox is the day in which there is an equal amount of daylight hours and nighttime hours. So 12 hours of nighttime and 12 hours of daytime. And that's where the word equinox comes from. Equal night. So the day is equal to the night. Exactly 12 hours of daylight and exactly 12 hours of nighttime. So that's an equinox. And there are two equinoxes in the year. There's the spring equinox, which is today, and there is the autumn equinox, which is exactly 6 months from now. And halfway between these are the solstices. So the autumn equinox is also a 12-hour day and 12-hour night. So that's also an equinox. So there, like I said, there's two, but the solstices are different. So now the summer solstice, which obviously happens in the summer, that is the day in which we have the most daylight hours of all, the shortest night, you could also call it. So you have more daylight hours than any other day in the year on the summer solstice, and the shortest number of nighttime hours. And when I'm talking about nighttime hours, that's from sunset to sunrise, and vice versa with daylight hours, that's from sunrise to sunset. It doesn't matter if there's clouds or not, it's just when the sun rises, whether you can see it or not. And the winter solstice is the exact opposite of that. It's the other pole, it's the other extreme. And that is the darkest night of the year, we refer to it as. And that has the longest number of hours between sunset and sunrise, and the shortest number of daytime hours. So the shortest number of hours in which the sun is above the horizon. And in various different cultures throughout history, we often see the annual solar cycle being marked on one of two main days, typically. Generally, we see somewhere around the spring equinox, such as now, or we see people marking the year at the winter solstice, which modern calendars roughly approximate. So the winter solstice is on usually around December 21st. And so our standard modern Gregorian calendar New Year is obviously about just over a week later. And in a lot of cultures, instead of marking it at that darkest day of the year, they mark it on the spring equinox, which is today. And that is because this is the point at which every day going forward is going to have more daylight hours than night hours. You see, it's a tipping point because today is the equal amount. Every day before today, if you go back to every day between the winter solstice, since the winter solstice, basically, all the way till today, the nighttime hours exceeded the daytime hours. Actually, all the way back to it's for half the year, actually. So it's not just the winter solstice because that's the darkest day, but the previous 3 months since the autumn equinox. So from the autumn equinox until the spring equinox, every day has more nighttime hours than daytime hours. But the spring equinox, that's the tipping point. Every day forward from here until the next equinox will have more daytime hours. And so it gets warmer. We have longer days of sunlight and that sort of thing. And so a lot of people or a lot of cultures will use that as their annual yearly marker, and they consider that the spring equinox is the beginning of the annual solar cycle. And now you see this in esoteric cultures as well. So, for example, in the Thelemic tradition founded by Aleister Crowley, in Thelema, today is their new year. So in that culture, or that subculture, I guess you could call it, in the Thelemic subculture, today is their Thelemic New Year. Now, you have another concept called the Procession of the equinoxes. And this gets into the idea of the zodiacal ages. So, if you're not aware of this, you've probably encountered the song. I can't remember the name of the artist or the band right now, but it's that song that goes, "This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius." Yeah, let me have a little bit of this tea here. Oh, hi, Beat Cat and Unknown Error. Thanks for stopping by. So, if you're not aware of this idea, like I said, you've probably heard that song at one point or another. The idea is that we go through vast periods of time, which we can call an age or an era, and each one is dominated by the influence of a particular zodiacal sign. And these ages last roughly around somewhere around 2,200, 2,300 years or so. And then it transitions into another zodiacal sign. And this is based off of the wobble of the Earth on its axis. So one full wobble is one, we could call it one great year. And we got some kind of a, hold on. Okay, sorry. Somebody was spamming the chat. I had to deal with that real quick. Sorry about that. All right, so if we can think of one entire full wobble of the Earth on its axis as a great year, then each zodiacal age can be thought of as like a great month. Now I see there's some people here saying the Earth doesn't rotate or the Earth doesn't move. Wake up, if you don't believe in, that explanation, regardless, as observed from the Earth, there are these changes in the sky. And on the morning of the spring equinox, when the sun rises above the horizon, the sign of the zodiac, the constellation of the zodiac that is on the horizon at the moment that the sun rises on the morning of the spring equinox, that is the that tells you what age you're in. So for a long time you have the age of Pisces, and we are currently moving into the age of Aquarius. So on the morning of the spring equinox, on this morning, today, when the sun rose, if you were to look at the sky on the horizon just as the sun is rising, if you could see what constellation of the zodiac was there in the sky, you can't really, because of the way that the sun works, right? It blocks out with light pollution essentially, so you can't quite see the stars there. But if you could see the stars on the horizon there, that sign of the zodiac on this morning on the horizon, that's what age we're in. And it changes over the course of roughly around 2,300 years or so, roughly around that. Now, if you were to actually look at where the constellations are in the sky, it's not exactly an equal amount of time that we spend in each of those zodiac signs. And it's the same for a solar year. When the sun moves through each of the 12 or 13 signs of the zodiac, depending on whether you recognize Ophiuchus or not as a separate sign, or if you amalgamate it with Scorpio, then the amount of time that we spend in each one isn't equal. But we can see on average, if we were looking at a 12 sign system, they say that the average is roughly around 2,200 years or so. And we can think of that as a great month in the great year, that full complete cycle where we come back around to the same zodiacal sign. And that is measured from that point today on the sunrise of the spring equinox. And like I said, as we go through it changes very, very slowly. They say it changes by about 1 degree out of 360 um, every like 72 years or something like that. So um, one human lifespan, roughly, is like a day in this great year, which is kind of an interesting thing. One human lifetime, around 75 years or so, is enough time for us to go one day in that year, roughly, which I think is a really interesting coincidence, if you want to consider it a coincidence. Now, people talk a lot about the implications of this, where they say that in the age of Pisces, we have Christianity coming to dominate a lot of the world, and the influence that they had was phenomenal in the most recent 2,000 years or so. So often we have people referring to Jesus as the prophet of the age of Pisces. And there may or may not be a prophet of the age of Aquarius. Aleister Crowley believed himself to be such, although he referred to it as the Aeon of Horus, which he considered himself to be the prophet of. There are other people who have made similar declarations regarding the new age or the new era of Aquarius. Now, we also have this idea that ties into this, which is the Mayan long count calendar. Now, the Mayan long count calendar is supposed to track this larger cycle, which I've been referring to as a great year. And I wonder how many years that works out to. Let me just quickly check here. Okay, so roughly around 26,000 years. So roughly around 26,000 years is one great year. And we travel through all 12 or 13 signs of the zodiac, meaning what we observe on the horizon on the morning of the spring equinox, where the sun rises. That changes over the course of that 26,000 years and moves through those zodiac signs, so the constellations of the zodiac. And that is the influence on society and such. And that's what the theory is of these zodiacal ages. Now, the Mayan long count calendar is supposed to be something that measures that larger cycle, which I've been referring to as a great year, the 26,000 year cycle. And we know, because it hit the zeitgeist real hard, that the winter solstice on December 21st of 2012 in the Gregorian calendar 2012, that was supposed to be the end of the Mayan long count calendar, the end of one great year and the beginning of a next. They referred to it as a creation. During the peak of the Mayan civilization, they believed themselves to be in the fourth creation. So now, since we are post December 21st, 2012, we are now in what the Mayans would have considered the fifth creation. And it's another cycle of that great year. It's the beginning of another great year. And they are measuring the end of that cycle on the winter solstice. So it's that competing mark of when the year ends. Is it on the darkest day of the year, when every day after that starts to get brighter and brighter? A larger and larger amount of time spent in daylight hours from that day forward? Or is it the tipping point where it's an equal amount of daylight and nighttime hours, and every day after that there's more daylight hours, which would be the spring equinox? Well, the Mayans, they were using that darkest day of the year, that winter solstice day. And if you have been following the material that I've been putting out there for the past decade or so, or longer, then you would know about the concept that I've been talking about called the new Luciferian era. And what I'm referring to, what I'm using that as a term for, is this fifth creation, or the new great year that just started on December 21st, 2012. That new full cycle, not just the transition from one zodiacal age to the next, but the beginning of an entire cycle of that. And the end of the old cycle, the beginning of the new one. So we are now in a new great year. And the Mayans, they were measuring it from the winter solstice. And I measure the new Luciferian era from the winter solstice as well. That's the Luciferian New Year, as I like to call it. And right now, we are in year 12 of the new Luciferian era. And that's because it began counting at 0. So on December 21st of 2012 in the Gregorian calendar, that was the beginning of year 0 in the new Luciferian era calendar. And there is a full calendar. And if you want to learn more about that calendar, one way that you can learn more about that is by joining the Novus Ordo Luciferi. And as a member, you get access to an online course that I gave to the members of the order about the new Luciferian era calendar and how to use it. It measures the daily Earth cycle of daylight, sunlight, 24-hour cycle. It measures instead of a month, it measures a lunation or a lunar cycle. So it changes, and it's not standardized in the same sense as like the months in the Gregorian calendar, where they stay the same. But the thing is, with the months of the Gregorian calendar, they're pretty much arbitrary. They don't really represent, they don't actually track natural cycles. They loosely kind of group together just chunks of a solar year. Whereas in the new Luciferian era calendar, it measures the lunations, which are usually around 29 days. And then it also measures the solar annual cycle. So those three main cycles, it encapsulates into a date format that measures those cycles. And then there's various benefits you can have from it, because you can tell when the new moon is, and things like that. It's easy just by looking at the date. Now, that course was recorded, and as a member, you get access to all the old courses that were taught so far to the members that were recorded and backed up. And you can attend live to any future courses that are held if you are a member of the Novus Ordo Luciferi. But instantly, if you join, like if you were to join right now, it's only $5 a month. If you join through the Patreon, you would get instant access. Well, not instant, I have to do it manually, but message me and very quickly I'll get back to you, and I'll get you access to all of the old recordings of all the courses that I've taught, and other members have assisted with different video sessions teaching material. All of those old courses, I believe there's over 40 hours of recorded material now at this point, and growing. You get access to. One of those is a course on the new Luciferian Era calendar and how to calculate those dates out. But the cool thing is, as a member of the NOL, the Novus Ordo Luciferi, you also get access to a Google Calendar that you can add to your existing Google Calendar if you have one. And it has all of the dates of the new Luciferian Era on top of the existing standard Gregorian calendar date. Now, I've manually calculated out each one, and I've been inputting it. So it's not fully complete, but I keep growing the range of dates. Right now, there must be close to a full year worth going forward into this year, as well as backwards a little bit. And I continue to expand it as I get time to kind of pick away at it. And I'll add like a few weeks or a month or 2 or 3 at a time sometimes. And so as a member, you get access to that. So you don't actually have to do those calculations yourself. I've done it for you, and I've put it on that. And that's an exclusive perk of membership, which you would also get if you joined. And there's a link in the description of this video if you are interested in that. But getting back to this, I'm measuring the new year. Like I said, I refer to it as the Luciferian New Year on the winter solstice. So now I got thinking, if we were to measure the zodiacal age based off of the position of the sun when it rises on the horizon on the morning of the winter solstice instead, what would that look like? And it's really interesting because we are currently leaving the age of, if we were to measure it based on the winter solstice, we are currently in the age of Ophiuchus, and we had just entered into the age of Ophiuchus and left the age of Sagittarius. The age of Sagittarius has just ended, just like in the mainstream version of this that's measured on the spring equinox. We have just left the age of Pisces, and we have just entered into the age of Aquarius. Now, it's a long transition period. Some people try and pick the exact date when they say, okay, on this date, it's the age of Aquarius, and before that's the age of Pisces. Well, it doesn't exactly work like that. There is sort of a date that could be calculated potentially, but there's debate over what that exact date is. So symbolically, I like to just refer to it as December 21st, 2012 as that date, because that's what the Mayans calculated out as the end of that great year and the beginning of a new one. And they had way more advanced calendars than what we have now. They had multiple calendars. They were tracking the Venus cycles, they were tracking lunar cycles, solar cycles, all these different celestial cycles. And they were super accurate compared to what we have now, which is practically garbage compared to what the Mayans had. So I like to use the Mayan date as that transition from that previous zodiacal age to the next, as well as a full cycle of it. So not just from one month to the next, but from one great year to the next. So if we were to use that as the marker, then we have just left the age of Sagittarius and entered into the age of Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus is that 13th zodiac sign, which is often recognized in sidereal astrology. And if we look at the more popular tropical astrology that's popular here in Western culture, um, they don't recognize Ophiuchus as a 13th zodiac sign. They blend it together, they amalgamate it with Scorpio, and they say that's one zodiac sign. The thing is, because both of those are smaller signs, meaning the sun doesn't stay in each of them as long. Now, if we were to amalgamate them into one, then it would be closer to equal time spent in that amalgamated Scorpio sign as the other 11 signs of the zodiac. So when the ancient Babylonian priests were putting this system together, they realized, you know what, if we combine those two signs or those two constellations, we could pretty much make it all equal, and there'd be 12 equal signs. And they created this idealized version of it because 12 was one of the numbers that had a lot of significance in their culture. They didn't use a base 10 numbering system when they were doing their math and their calculations and such. They were using a base 60 number system. Sexagesimal, it's called, rather than our modern decimal system that we use today. And because of that, they had different numbers that became special or sacred to them. And 12 was one of those numbers. And we see that today in the idea of time, the 12 hours of roughly of half of a day. And on the equinox, that would be 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of nighttime, like today. And so these special numbers, they realized, okay, if we combine Ophiuchus and Scorpio together, then we can pretty much kind of fudge the numbers just a little bit, and now we have 12 equal signs of the zodiac. And that has come forward today into what we refer to as tropical astrology. Now, tropical astrology has failed to take into account the precession of the equinoxes, that slow drift of the whole system over thousands of years. So what we use today when we refer to as mainstream tropical astrology, the signs aren't even in the same place as the constellation it was named after anymore. So if you were to go out, if you were to look up on an ephemeris, and that's based on tropical astrology, and look, okay, where is Leo tonight in the sky? And if you were to look up to that precise spot, you wouldn't see Leo there, or you would see it really close by. But because of precession, it's actually shifted out of where tropical astrology says it is. So it doesn't actually match up with observable reality anymore. But people say, well, the system still works, because a lot of people make excuses for it, or apologists for tropical astrology will say, well, it's not really based on the stars, it's based on the seasons. But we just use the stars as convenient names, and so what if it's drifted? It still makes sense. Well, yeah, sure, if that's how that system works. But in that case, it's kind of deceiving by using the star names when the stars aren't even in those positions anymore in the sky, right? So sidereal astrology corrects that. Sidereal astrology takes into account where exactly you would look up and see that actual constellation. It doesn't turn it into, well, I mean, some forms of sidereal do, but the type of sidereal astrology that I'm talking about recognizes where those signs of the zodiac are actually in the sky, the constellations themselves, if you were to look up in the sky, you'd actually see them in that spot. And that's where it's calculated when sidereal astrology is done. And it's not an equal 12 equal intervals. It's 13 unequal intervals of time spent in each of these constellations. And I prefer that because it makes a lot more sense to me for it to represent the actual observable universe rather than using the names of these stars and then they're not even where you're saying they are, right? And I like to recognize the 13 signs as well because Ophiuchus has its own unique energy to it that is different than the energy of Scorpio. There are some similarities and there are some overlap in the meanings, but ultimately I believe that Ophiuchus deserves its own interpretation, its own meaning, its own identity that's separate from Scorpio. And if you look at the thumbnail on this video, you'll see one of the common symbols for Ophiuchus, which is basically a U, and it's got a squiggle through it. And that's because Ophiuchus, the word itself, actually means serpent bearer. And it means basically carrying a serpent, or a figure who's holding the serpent. And in a lot of the pictures you'll see of that zodiac sign or constellation, you'll see, people draw out what it's supposed to be, and you'll see a man holding, or a figure, sometimes it's considered a woman, but it's a figure that's holding a serpent, and that's what that symbol is supposed to represent. The U is like the two arms, and then the squiggle is the serpent that's being held by the serpent bearer, or Ophiuchus. Now, the meaning of this symbol, it's highly tied to healing, and it's also related to forbidden knowledge as well because of the serpent. Now, the serpent, if we look at the symbolism of the serpent, there's a lot of things associated with that. You have the idea of renewal because of the shedding of the skin that most snakes do. They'll shed their skin, and it's a sign of renewal and rebirth and being adaptable and growing and allowing yourself to change and grow. And another aspect of the serpent is the forbidden knowledge, or knowledge, or hidden knowledge even. And that is because you see snakes going into holes in the ground, going into the dark caverns of the earth. And that's very heavily symbolic of the subconscious mind, delving into the hidden secrets of the shadow, the psychological shadow, we could even say, if you value Jungian terminology. Hey, Athena has made a comment here. If we had 13 months in the calendar, each month would equal like one moon cycle, one female's monthly cycle, 2 bi-weekly paychecks every month. I say we bring back 13 month/zodiacs per year. Yeah. Heck yeah. No, I agree. And if you were to look into the new Luciferian era, and there's a lot of material that's publicly available if you do a search for it, new Luciferian era, there's enough information that's available publicly that you can actually do these calculations yourself for what day it is in the new Luciferian era calendar. And let me just quickly look up the calendar, actually. Let me see what day we have. What is today? Today is March 20th, of course, the spring equinox. And in the new Luciferian era calendar, it is year 12, lunation 3, day 21. So that means we're 21 or 22 days into the third or fourth lunar cycle of year 12. So it all starts as counting at 0. So that's why I said 22nd day. So we are day 21 into lunation 3 of year 12. Or we could say 12/3/21 NLE, or New Luciferian Era. That's how it would be written, 12-3-21 NLE. So we know that the next new moon is on March 29th. So that's the beginning of the next lunation, because we mark it on the darkest day of each cycle. So we mark it on the darkest point of the lunar cycle as well, which is the new moon. And the annual solar cycle is measured on the darkest day of the solar cycle, which is the winter solstice. So on the 29th of March, it will be year 12, lunation 4, day 0. So it's how many days into that current lunation is what the day number represents. And then that lunation number is how many lunar cycles into the year we are. And then, of course, the year number tells us how many solar cycles it's been since the new Luciferian era began on the winter solstice of 2012 in the Gregorian calendar. So yeah, the new Luciferian era calendar does recognize 13 months, but we call them lunations because they match exactly with the lunar cycle. They're completely aligned and synchronized with the lunar cycle. So they're not always the same every year, but it represents the actual observable universe and the cycles that we see therein. And so if you wanted to get a more in-depth understanding of that, you could join the Novus Ordo Luciferi for that course. And I believe it's a 90 to 120 minute course, something like that. I can't remember. It was probably around 2 hours or so. And there is documentation about that as well. And like I said, and you also, if you were to join the NOL, you also get access to the Google Calendar, which has all those dates already written out for you. So you can just look it up. I'll just look it up on my phone sometimes. I'll be like, oh, what day is it today? Because I've already done the calculations previously and entered them into the calendar. And that's a perk of membership that I don't share it with anybody who's not a member. But you can do the calculations yourself though and look it up, figure out what the day is. So, getting back to this idea of the zodiacal ages and measuring it from the winter solstice instead, I see it as like a complement to the more mainstream way of measuring the procession and the zodiacal ages based off of today, the spring equinox. The measuring it based off of the spring equinox is a great way of understanding kind of the mainstream currents, the influence on the mainstream, on the day side of things, on mainstream society, etc. Whereas looking at where we are in the zodiacal ages in that great year, where we are, what great month we're in, if we measure it based on the winter solstice instead, or in addition, or looking at that as well, I think it complements it, and it kind of gives us that night side view, that shadow, looking into the shadow side or the more hidden side of the current zodiacal age. And maybe it applies more closely to people who are initiates of esoteric knowledge, people who are members of esoteric orders such as the Novus Ordo Luciferi, people who embrace the new Luciferian era and are aware of these cycles and are aligning their actions in order to benefit from these new energies and the currents that we're currently experiencing from these energies, can tap into, if we look at, if we measure it from the darkest day of the year instead and look at it from that lens, from the winter solstice point, that competing new year measuring point, if we look at it on that darkest day of the year, we can see the shadow side, or the hidden side, the forbidden knowledge side, the occult side of the zodiacal age, and gain some insights. Now, if we look at the previous era, or the previous zodiacal age from that shadow side, let's call it the Nocturne Age. That's the name that I've come up with to refer to it as. If you like that, you can use that as well. But that's what I've been calling it when I've been exploring these ideas in my own mind, the Nocturne Age, as opposed to the more mainstream zodiacal age. So in the Nocturne Age, we just left the Nocturne Age of Sagittarius, and we've just entered into the Nocturne Age of Ophiuchus. So we've entered into the occult age, in a sense, or the night side of the zodiacal age is Ophiuchus right now. And that is the serpent bearer. It is the healer. It's the healer with forbidden knowledge. It is the light bearer, in a sense. It is aligned with Luciferian thought as the one who is sharing hidden knowledge in order to heal and renew and allow people to adapt to changing conditions, to emancipate themselves from old, outdated mindsets, to remove the influence from their lives of systems of influence and power that are focused on maintaining ignorance in those who they are taking advantage of, who they are considered to think of themselves as ruling. And they keep people in the dark. They keep people ignorant and not knowing the true nature of things. They weave their narratives, and we, as Luciferians, we bring these secret teachings, this hidden knowledge, this forbidden knowledge to light in order to help those who are seeking this knowledge to find it and to emancipate themselves from these oppressive systems of power that are taking advantage of those who are ignorant of that knowledge. So we want to share that knowledge. We want to help renew society, to eliminate the influence of those who want to keep us ignorant, and to institute a new age of enlightenment if possible. We recognize that we may not succeed. There are forces that are huge that are moving in these directions, and we could see another dark age. But as initiates, there are ways that we deal with that. There are ways of going underground, maintaining our secrecy, our privacy, and moving the hidden knowledge forward in ways that are more subtle, more private, and doing so in a way that we can guarantee the consistency of this knowledge moving forward into the future at such time when it can be practiced more openly again. These types of things happen in cycles, so we have to be aware of how they work. We have to try and push against the encroachment of a dark age. We also have to prepare just in case a dark age happens anyways. So these are things that we work on in the Novus Ordo Luciferi. We learn this hidden knowledge, and we work to make information available to those who are looking for it. We are trying to build a repository of knowledge that we share with the world. We do have our own private personal practices that we practice as an organization together. But our main goal is that we are trying to share knowledge with the world, especially to those who are looking for it. And if you'd like to join us in that quest, if you want to receive teachings in a complete occult system that I refer to as Luciferian Alchemy, then you can go to Novus Ordo Luciferi.org, or you can go to the link to the Patreon, which is in the description below, and you can join. It's only $5 a month. You can try it out for just $5, and then if you don't really like it or it's not what you thought, you can always cancel and you're out $5 at the most, right? If you already know that this is what you're into, this is what you have been looking for, you can also go to that novusordolusiferi.org, and there is a link on there. If you go to get started, there's a link on there where you can purchase a year of membership dues up front, and you'll save a little bit of money by paying for a full year of membership dues up front. For those people who already know that this is what they're into. And we already have a group of amazing members who are already spread across the globe. I think we're up to at least a dozen countries now having members in, and we are at the stage where we are starting to form local branches where people can have regular physical and online meetups with people in their areas, people who are also not necessarily in a certain area but have a certain subject that they have a particular interest in. And actually, after this live stream, which I'm going to end in about 5 minutes here, those who are members of the Novus Ordo Luciferi, we're going to have an hour or so of private hangout. We're not going to record it. It's not a structured course like some of the private events that we do have for members, but tonight we're just doing a casual hangout. So if you've been enjoying this conversation and you want to keep it going, then you could actually join the Patreon now, and you'll get access to a post that has a link to that meeting, that private meeting that we're going to have in about 5 minutes from now, where we're just going to have unstructured conversation. We'll probably talk about this topic a little bit. We'll just, get to know each other and have a bit of camaraderie and just joke around and talk about whatever happens to come up in our minds in the moment. And so, yeah, that's about to start in about 5 minutes. So if you are a member of the Novus Ordo Luciferi, or if you decide to join now, if you go into the description, there's a Patreon link, then you can join us for the private discussion, the private hangout tonight, and ongoing courses as well that we have quite regularly on various different subjects. We had one on lucid dreaming, astral projection, the secrets of the tarot, all sorts, energy work, the new Luciferian era, the calendar itself, money magic, manifestation, that sort of thing. We've had a bunch of different courses. There's one on building community locally, and these are ones that have already happened and we have archived. And as a member, when you join, you get access to the full back catalog of those courses that have been taught, which I said before, I think there's over 40 hours worth of material now in that back catalog that you get access to. And as I said, ongoing courses going forward that we are taught that if you're able to go to it live, you can be part of it. And if you don't manage to catch it live, those courses are recorded for members, and they become part of that back catalog that you get access to. So, anybody who's interested in these topics, I highly recommend joining. You can choose how involved you get in the practices. It's up to you. There are no mandatory minimum levels of activity. You can join, explore the material, and use whatever little bits of it you find useful. Or if you want, you can join. You can go through the material in a comprehensive manner, in the way that the order teaches it in a sequence that's logical, and you can gain recognitions along the way for having mastered that material to a level that you can get that recognition for. There's a basic degree structure that we have just started to put into place, which also comes with a way to approach the material in a logical progression. True. Glad you managed to pop in here. We're about to have the private members discussion or hangout just after this. We're going to end this in a couple minutes, and then we'll see you there in the private hangout. And for all of you who showed up today live, I appreciate you. Anybody who's watching this after the fact, I appreciate you staying this long to watch this video. I encourage you to take the next step in joining us in the Novus Ordo Luciferi, to develop community around the world, and to encourage knowledge, the expansion of knowledge and the sharing of knowledge with the world, in order to try and make it a better place, but give people more options to have informed decisions about their lives. And we have a lot of fun events like the private meetups where we can just chat about whatever. We have these courses. There's a calendar. There's rituals that you can learn. There's practices. There are philosophy teachings that you can read in documents and such like that. Lucid dreaming practices, etc. So all that good stuff. If you're into that, I highly encourage you to join the NOL and participate in what we're doing with that project. And until next time, everyone, stay lucid.